Okay, here we are back to grammar. I know we're going to take about a 2-week break from vocabulary and focus on grammar. And today we're talking about punctuating direct quotations. So quotes are something that we often use in our writing, right? We're used to including quotes. Sometimes we often, in our essays, will quote what the author of one of the articles has said. So today we're going to focus on that punctuation. So using the direct quote, which we know is a person's exact words, it comes right out of the text. So they tell us here that it can help make your writing come alive. You can write the exact words of a character. So maybe you're quoting a character in a story, or you can write what someone in real life has said or written. That's typically what we do when we're including quotes in our essays. So we want to make sure that we're using quotation marks, that's these punctuation marks right here, before and after the exact words of a speaker or author. So let's take a look at a few examples. In the first example here, they're telling us that a direct quotation can come at the beginning of a sentence. So sometimes you might see your quote at the beginning of the sentence. So I'm going to read this sentence to you guys, and then we're going to talk about what's being quoted. "I can't wait to see the Washington Monument," said Elena. Well, there's a key word here that tells me that this is a quote, and it's this one right here, said. Well, okay, so what was it that she said? It's right here, and again, it's at the beginning of a sentence. So I can't wait to see the Washington Monument. Now, let's zoom in and take a look at the punctuation that they've included here in that sentence. We have our quotation mark at the beginning of the words that are being quoted, and then I actually wrote over them when I circled the word said, but there's actually 2 quotation marks here. So we have that punctuation mark, the exclamation point, and then we have our quotation marks. Again, right around the exact words of that person, Elena. Let's look at the second example here. So now they're telling us that a direct quote can also come at the end of a sentence. So this is how typically you guys, when you're writing, this is how most of you include a quote. And we use a comma. I think back to Landon, because Landon, you asked me that question during benchmark testing about the comma. So we do use a comma to separate the beginning of a sentence from the quotation. So let's take a look at this example. That was my dog sneezing, sorry. Author Rachel White wrote, now that's going to separate the beginning of the sentence from the quotation. So now I know that after this comma right here, now I'm going to begin my quote. "The Washington Monument is one of the most popular tourist attractions in the United States." End the quote. So again, this is the part that she wrote or that she spoke in the article. Therefore, we need those quotation marks right around that part of the sentence. And again, we're going to include the comma here to separate the beginning of our sentence and the direct quote. Let's look at another example. Use quotation marks only when you are showing a person's exact words. So this is really important. Not when you are explaining what the person said. So let's take a look at these 2 examples here using Nathan. Nathan said, comma, "I look forward to the trip to Washington." Again, we have quotation marks because those were the exact words that came out of Nathan's mouth. But now let's look at the second example. Nathan said that he looks forward to the trip to Washington. Can you see the difference? We're not going to put a comma here in quotes because would it really make sense for Nathan to stand up and say that he looks forward to the trip to Washington? No, that doesn't make any sense. So here what they've done is they've just said or explained what it was that Nathan said. Again, no quotation marks because these are not the words that he actually spoke. So let's now do a couple examples together. And then you guys are going to try 4 on your own. So let's look at the first one. "I'm almost ready to go," exclaimed Chris. Well, in this sentence, I know that the quote comes at the very beginning because exclaimed Chris is kind of like said Chris, stated Chris. So exclaim just means that Chris evidently said this in kind of an excited way. I'm almost ready to go, exclaimed Chris. So we need those quotation marks around the beginning of the sentence. Now, you're probably wondering, but what about the comma to separate? Well, in this instance, you don't need a comma because you already have this punctuation mark right here that separates these two ideas, the quote and then the end of the sentence, exclaimed Chris. Let's take a look at another example. Let me zoom out so you guys can see it all. Mr. Mendez said, before we go, we need to learn about the Washington Monument. Now, I guess we need to separate the two parts of the sentence with a comma. So where do you think the comma will go? Right after the word said, because now I know that Mr. Mendez said, I'm getting ready to jump right into my direct quotation. So we do have a capital letter here to start our quote. And what is it that we need in between the comma and this capital B? Right, we need our quotation marks. So we're going to put those there. And then we're also going to put the quotation marks around the last part that he spoke. So it ends here on the word monument. So after that period, we're going to close out our sentence with our quotation marks here. Let's look at example number 3. Why did they build the monument? Alva asked. Well, first of all, I know that this is a quote here at the beginning because it says Alva asked. So I need my quotation marks to start the exact words that came out of Alva's mouth. And those were, why did they build the monument? So I'm going to put my quotes here because that's the end of the words that she's saying or speaking. Now again, I don't need a comma because I already have that question mark. So that's already going to separate these two ideas. Let's look at example number 4. Take a moment. I want you to read the sentence to yourself. Excellent. So in this example, Chris replied, that's not a quote. Those were not words that he actually said, but that does tell me that I'm getting ready to quote something that Chris said. So Chris replied, meaning he answered or stated back. So I'm going to place a comma here to separate those two ideas. And now I need my quotation marks because these are the words that Chris was getting ready to say. It was built to honor George Washington. And then you're right. We need quotation marks right here to end that sentence. Let's look at the last example. The monument is a symbol of his leadership, wrote author Rachel White. So what do you think about this one? This one's a little bit more tricky. So if we're saying wrote author Rachel White, that means that these were exact words that she spoke. So the monument is a symbol of his leadership. Those are the words that she said. So we need that in quotation marks. Now, there's one more thing that we need. In those previous examples where the quote came at the beginning, we didn't have to include a comma because we had those punctuation marks. However, I don't see one here. So what do we need to include? That's right. We need a comma after the word leadership. So now we're separating these two ideas, the quote and the end of our sentence. Great job, guys. You have 4 examples. You're going to read. They are multiple choice, and you have to select the correct sentence that is using the quotation marks correctly. Let me know if you have any questions.